Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I got to tell you something, people. When the song Safety Dance came out, it was my freshman year of college, my spring semester, and it was popular. But then I went down to the Jersey Shore, and it got even more popular. And then when I came back to my sophomore year, it became the iconic song that it is now. And what I loved about that song was when it came on, if you were at a bar or a party, everyone just danced. And being someone from the 80s, that's what we did, man. I was in my late teens, early 20s. We went out with friends, we partied, we danced, we tried to get lucky. And it was such a great song that's a big part of my life. And the gentleman who is responsible for that is on my show. And his band, Men Without Hats, will be with my friend Jack Hughes from Wang Song on the Abducted by 80s tour. And then they do the Totally Tubular Festival. So if you're an 80s fan, this is the summer for you. You can go to 2 concerts. You can see Men Without Hats twice. And you can see all these other great bands. And my guest is Ivan Doroschuk. How you doing, Ivan?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
I got to tell you something. I hate going to the gym, but I get on the treadmill. In the last few days, I listened to Again Part 1. And holy crap, that is a killer EP. I got to tell you that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We had a lot of fun making it. I think it shows.
Well, I wanted to know, Satellite of Love is one of my favorite Lou Reed songs. How did you choose the songs? Because you have the Stones in there, you have Tragically Hip, but you start off with Lou Reed. Tell me about the process of making that and picking the songs, because they're all great.
Yeah, well, we wanted to pick songs that influenced us, basically. Growing up in the 70s, I'm a child of the 70s, glam rock and all that. So we've got some Bowie, Mott the Hoople in there too. And Lou Reed's always been a big influence on me. I saw Lou Reed in Rome. I went on my honeymoon, my first wife, and we saw Lou Reed at the Circus Maximus in Rome, and it kind of stayed with me. And I've always been a big fan of the Stones, greatest rock and roll band in the world, and Tragically Hip, the greatest Canadian band ever. So it was mostly stuff that influenced us growing up. Is what we tried to do.
Well, how did you choose? I mean, okay, I can understand Mott the Hoople. Actually, I just interviewed Ian a few weeks ago, and I can understand you play that song, All the Young. That's a given. But how did you choose, like, with the Stones and Tragically Hip? And then I want to talk about the final song, which is sort of a remake of you. We'll talk about that. But how do you pick, with someone, when you say the Stones are the greatest rock and roll band in the world, so that means you're a huge fan, as I am, how do you pick one song? I mean, like me, I love Gimme Shelter. I would have been like, oh, I want to do that. But how did you pick that one song? How did you pick 2,000 Light Years from Home?
That always happened. It just happened to be my favorite song. I picked my favorite Rolling Stones song. That one has always been my favorite. It was kind of a sleeper for me. And when we did it, I found out that it's a lot of Stones fans' favorite song too. So it was good. And Tragically Hip, that was their first single in Canada, and I went and saw them on their first tour, and for that song especially. And they have so many great songs too, that I took the first one I liked, and that's kind of how we went about it.
Well, how about at the end? You do No Friends of Mine, and that's because everyone knows you from the Safety Dance, which we'll talk about, but this is a different version, and I think it's good because when I interviewed Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, they changed Tempted because they said they've been playing it for a long time, and after a while, you want to do something different. But how did you change? I mean, whose idea was it to change and make it, No Friends of Mine? I mean, because it's nice, it's a good song.
Yeah, well, we'd been working on sort of a acoustic greatest hits album before making Again, and that was a leftover. We had all the songs kind of arranged on piano or piano vocals, or one instrument, guitar and vocals, something like that, and with different arrangements, either completely different musical scores or different deliveries, whatever. And that was just one of the songs that was held over from that project. That project is still on the shelf. We're still working on it. But while we made Again, doing a covers record, we thought, hey, why don't we just stick this in it? I think fans will like it. People will like it. It's like you say, we've been playing the other version for so long. Give them something else.
As an artist, do you worry about that though? Like, because so many people are afraid of change. I mean, it happens all the time. You watch a TV show, they replace someone, and people, why'd you do that? Were you worried that some of your diehard fans would be like, oh man, what are they doing? I mean, because it must tax on you because you're a creative person, and we all overthink when we're creative. But I mean, did it worry you at all that what if they didn't like it?
No, not really. No, we thought it was pretty good. As long as we like it, I think the listeners will. Most of them agree. It's not as if we're dropping the other one and not playing it at all. We play them. In show we start off our set with the short version. We end up with the long version, and then I make kind of a joke coming back with the encore. I say, hey, some people want me to play Safety Dance 3 times, so here we go. And so it's a crowd pleaser. We use it for the end of the show, and a big power ballad at the end of the night. It always drives people home.
So after that, you come out with Again Part 2. Was that something planned, or when did you? I mean, how did you come with that? Because that was your first original album in a while. What made you decide? Was it because you got a good reaction to Again Part 1? You said, we're going to write our own stuff. Or tell me the process of coming out with that album, because that's more of your view on the world, right?
Yeah. Well, it was actually going to be a double album. We were going to put both of them out at once, and the record label suggested that we split them up just for splitting them up's sake, and that's what we did. And while the first Part 1 is like you said a covers EP, the second album was songs that were unfinished demos, songs that we had in the vault. It was just songs that were already written, and a couple that were written, while we were putting all the other tracks down. You always get inspired while you're in studio doing a record to write new material. So there are a couple of tracks there that are brand new, but the bulk of the songs were, like I said, unfinished demos and stuff from in the vault that were back from the Safety Dance days. There's tracks in there that Heaven, for example, was a track that we played live, but we never recorded. It was things like that, and we thought we'd do a bit of house cleaning and get all our demos in order.
Now, you said you got inspired in the studio for some of the songs. You've been at this for a while. Has your writing style changed? I mean, what is your writing process? As I've said, I do comedy, and I don't have a writing process. Something pops in my head, and I go, oh, that might be funny. I said to my wife, is this funny? And she'll go, no, all right, well, I'll try again. But for you, what is your process for writing? Did you just get, like, in the studio, did you just get inspired and say, I got to write this, or did that day you read a newspaper, or, I mean, how did you create the new material?
It kind of, I tend to watershed when I'm writing. I tend to, I don't, some people believe that it's 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration, and that you have to go and work at your craft every day. I try to do that sometimes, but it usually doesn't work for me. It just happens that I'll sit down and write 10 songs in a week, and the whole album will come to me all at once, that type of thing. And so that's how I usually go about it. My songwriting techniques haven't changed since the beginning. I went to the Beatles school of songwriting, and I tend to have a sort of a mold that I sort of fit all my songs into. I sort of mirror my songwriting after like the stuff that I learned growing up, where songs have intros and verses and choruses and second verses and double choruses and outros and stuff like that. So my songwriting was always pretty traditional, and it's kind of stayed that way. So what got you into music? I think you came from a musical family. I know you have the brothers in the band, but at what point did you decide to pick up an instrument? Because as I say, I've said this story many times. My brother played the drums; he was good. My sister played the French horn and the cello, and my dad played the sax. And I just sucked. I couldn't figure a guitar out. But when did you know that you were going to play music? Did it just come naturally to you? Was it like you picked it up one day and you went, "Oh"? Well, like you said, I come from a musical family. My mother was a voice teacher at McGill University for 25 years. My dad was an amateur musician who played in barn dances in rural Manitoba in the middle of prairies in Canada. And so I took piano lessons all my life, and I think the turning point was the Sex Pistols. Basically, it was the whole punk rock new wave movement, the DIY movement that came along, and just people were getting tired of dinosaur rock. They were getting tired of disco, and this new movement came along, punk new wave, and said, "Hey, just do it yourself." And I figured, listening to the Sex Pistols for the first time, I said, if these guys can do it, I think I can give it a shot. So, I listen to that stuff now, and it doesn't sound as raw as it did back 40 years ago, but it sounds pretty clean right now compared to a lot of the other stuff that came after it. But that was it. It was, like I say, the Beatles taught me how to write a song, and the Sex Pistols gave me the kick in the ass to get out and do it myself.
Now, you're from Montreal. What was the music climate like in Montreal at that time? Because I grew up near Philadelphia, and I just turned 60, and we had the new wave bands like the Hooters and Tommy Conwell and that thing, and then we had the metal bands like Cinderella. So we had a mixture. That was our climate for me. And then Sex Pistols, they were a little before me, but we got into it. But what was the climate like when you guys started jamming as a punk band? What was the climate like the rest of the people doing in Montreal at the time?
Well, Montreal has always been a big place for two kinds of music. It was progressive rock music was always big in Montreal. Bands like Genesis and King Crimson and Pink Floyd were always huge here. Like Genesis would come through Montreal and play the Montreal Forum to 20,000 people, and then go to New York and play the Bottom Line for 200, And then there was disco. Montreal was a big disco. I used to call Montreal the Little Apple. There was a big Montreal-New York connection, and the disco scene was absolutely huge there. And so that's what I kind of brought. I always considered the new wave music and the type of music that I did, the electro pop music that we did, was a combination of those two musics. There was a combination of progressive rock music, of keyboard synthesizer music, and disco. It was synth music with a dance beat. And that's kind of what I brought to the table. It was a combination of the two major, musical styles that were happening in the 70s in Montreal. And we just sort of amalgamated them, stuck them together, and brought them to the 80s.
When did you decide to shift from punk, though? Because you guys started out as a punk band. When did you sit there and go, punk's not working good in Montreal? I said if there's disco in Prague, it's not, you don't see punk falling in the middle. I mean, when did you guys change to the sound that you cultivated?
We changed pretty fast. We started off as a punk band, and we were doing like contortion covers and like sort of playing no wave kind of music, sticking alligator clips to our guitars and playing with pieces of metal. And I think I at one point, it was really early on, I decided, after a couple of punk shows and having been spat on and having things thrown at me all throughout the set, I decided to switch over to keyboards and go a bit more pop. It was a conscious effort. I wanted to reach more people. I thought the Top 40 was a huge, amazing platform. It was the biggest platform in the world if you wanted to get your ideas across, any kind of ideas or musical ideas or political ideas. It was one of the best platforms that there was. And so it was early on. It didn't take me too long to switch from punk rock to new wave.
Now, how did you guys go about getting your first record deal?
Well, we put out an EP on our own. We put out a 4-song EP, self-financed, and put that out and started shopping around, just started sending it to all the companies. We got turned down by every major label in North America. And we finally got picked up by a small little label in London, England, called Static Records, which was started by a guy who used to work at Virgin Records. And so he picked us up and put out the EP and gave us money to go in the studio and put out Rhythm of Youth with the safety dance on it. And we were being distributed in Canada as an import, actually. People had to pay like $15, $20 for our record in our own city. And it was kind of amusing, but not really. And it was when we were in the studio making our second album, making the follow-up to the Rhythm of Youth album, we were stoked. We were like, in our minds, we had made it. We were back in the studio making another record. we didn't have an American deal yet, but the record company in England phoned up one day and said, hey, guys, we want you to make a remix of Safety Dance. Everybody's doing it. You got to make these 12-inch remix. Just make it longer, stick a few more lines in there, do some stuff. And sorry about that. And so the 12-inch. So we did this 12-inch. We took a break from recording our second album, did the 12-inch remix, and sent it off to the company and thought nothing of it. They released it, and it went #1 on the Billboard dance charts. So that kind of changed our lives. That changed everything. We got all the American labels started coming knocking, and we signed a deal then and got yanked out of the studio, put in a bus, and sent on tour for the next couple of years.
How did that feel when it must feel great when you were getting turned down, and then all of a sudden the dance version comes out, and then the record companies go crazy. It just shows how fickle the industry is. But what is that like as a young artist? Are you like, screw you, or are you like, hell yeah, this is what we deserve?
Oh, we were happy. Like when you're a young songwriter, you think that everything that you do is, destined for greatness, and you can't understand why people aren't lining up to give you their money. So it was a good feeling though. We were totally over the top with the whole thing. It was that, and MTV was a big help too. MTV putting out the video in an era where there was only 10 videos in existence, so we got really heavy rotation, and I was getting recognized everywhere I went, and it was quite life-changing, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, no, as I said in the beginning, Safety Dance was, for me, was such a big part. I remember I used to work in the kitchen, and that we would piss off the owner's girlfriend because we would put Safety Dance on when we were cleaning up, and we drink our beers, and we danced just to annoy her. It was everywhere. We were back at our chef things, clicking the fry things, and she would get pissed off, and we'd be doing the Safety Dance with the fry things. And when you wrote, is it true that you wrote that song because you went into a bar and you couldn't pogo, or is that an urban myth?
No, that's the origin story. That's a true story. I was it happened more than once too. It was the dying days of disco, late '70s, and we would go into discotheques, and every time the DJ would sneak in some new wave songs like B-52s, Rock Lobster, or Blondie's Heart of Glass was a big one, or Devo's Satisfaction. We'd get up on the dance floor and start pogoing, and nobody had ever seen that. Pogoing was the precursor to slam dancing in the mosh pit, and so nobody had seen it back then, and everybody thought we were fighting. And the bouncer would come up and toss us out, and it happened after happening 2 or 3 times. I just went home and did something about it, and wrote a song.
I gotta ask you though. You're pissed about getting thrown out for pogoing, but then you sit down and you write the song, and the lyric. How did you lyrically come up to think that S S S S A? Everyone knows that. Like when you sat down, was your first draft going, okay, you can dance, did it, and then you put S-A-. How did you come about organizing? And
the spelling of it came from the 12-inch. That's one of the things we did for the 12-inch. And seriously, back then I was channeling Grandmaster Flash. Rap music was kind of at its infancy as well, and I was listening to White Lines and stuff like that, and so I said, hey, those New York bands, they're all talking in there. Everybody's talking in songs now. Let's just talk, Let's just spell it out for them. And that's how it came. But it was really innocent. We didn't actually know what we were doing. But it was a white boy rap, basically.
Now, I want to hear about the video because, as I said, and you're right, MTV. I'm a product of MTV, man. And we were just talking about this the other day. Me and my buddy were out for a drink, and we were talking about how, when Michael Jackson's Thriller came on, they said what time it would come on, and you'd be like, yeah. And then when we were in college, we'd sit in a dorm, and as someone who had TV and they had cable, their parents paid for cable, we'd go and watch that. So when they did the video, whose idea was it? Because I think what makes that video special is it just gives a different, like, it's one of those videos that the song just fits the video. It gives you this medieval feeling, but it's just, if you broke them up and you said, this is a song, this is what people are going to know, but who was it, your idea, or did the director come to you, or how did you, and where did you shoot it?
Okay, well, it was shot in England, in Wiltshire, just outside of Bath. And the thing was, it was pre-internet days, so the video producer was in England, I was in Montreal, and we communicated by letters. There was no internet, there was no emails or anything like that. And so we wrote letters to each other, and our letters crossed the pond simultaneously, and we both received each other's script basically at the same time. And it was the same idea. He had come up with a Pied Piper kind of storyline, and so had I. And even the places that I had chosen in Montreal, had we shot it there, were very similar to the ones we ended up shooting it at in England. So there was a connection there. It just seemed to fit automatically. It just seemed to be this Pied Piper thing would we could run with it. And I think that's one of the magic things about the video, is that we did do a medieval kind of thing, and everybody was expecting spiked hair and zipper clothes and pointy shoes or something on a dance floor. And we came up with this medieval thing that, it's like watching a Western. You can't really date it now. Now when you watch 80s videos, you can chuckle at some of them. You can chuckle at the clothing. You can chuckle at the dance moves. But watching the Safety Dance video, you can't sort of pin it into an era. It's like I say, it's like watching a Western. You can't really date it. And also the dance move with just making the S with the arms, I think that won us a lot of friends, because there was no dance. There was no Safety Dance. All it is making an S with your arms. And I think, pretty much everybody can do that. And so that gave us fans like right across the spectrum. We've got punk rockers who like it. We got jazz people who like it. People who like pop music like it. People who like folk music. Like, everybody kind of likes it because it's accessible to them. There's no, everybody loves a medieval video, and everybody can do the S movement. So I think it was a pretty easy sell.
Well, what's also funny is you had said how you had a little bit of disco influence from when your thing, and when everyone's doing that dance, disco was one where they used to do those line dances. I mean, did that ever cross? Like, it's sort of like it's like a cool version. Like, I guess when they did disco, but for us, I'm like, after Saturday Night Fever, like, disco, America, it was like, disco sucks, But did you ever think about that? Because the video just has everybody, they're having fun. I mean, it was sort of like that thing you would see in the discos.
Yeah, well, that was it. That was it basically, is making a dance move that everybody could do, and everybody joins in at the end. It's there's been a lot of interpretations of the song based on a few images right at the end. Some people thought it was against nuclear war. Some people thought it was, for safe sex, all kinds of stuff. But it was basically, you can dance if you want to, was the only message. And it's a message that's crossed generations now too. I think it's something that I think people today still need to hear, and kids today still want to hear, that they can dance if they want to. And that's why we play shows now. We go on tour, and we get our original fans come to see us, but they, more often than not, are bringing their kids, and sometimes even their grandkids, and everybody's having a good time. So it's good. We've been blessed in that way.
Isn't it funny how people sit there and you're the writer, and they'll tell you what the song means? Years ago, I wrote a play in Hollywood, and someone's like, "Oh, it was about a guy talking to a mouse." That's all it was. And they're like, "Oh, so it's his conscience." And I'm like, "No. I mean, what? As a songwriter, that must crack you up, because they know more than you. Like, oh yeah, Ivan, this is what the song means." And you're like, "Well, no, it just means you got to dance."
Well, it does. The song, sometimes I think the song is a lot bigger than I am. It's a lot bigger than the band. And sometimes I feel that it doesn't even belong to me anymore. It belongs to everybody else, It belongs to the world. And sometimes I've said this before, I feel like a traveling musical museum curator going around presenting this musical artifact that brings incredible joy to people. But a lot of people come up and tell me what it means to them, but it usually brings them back in time. That's one of the incredible things about music, is the time travel quality that it provides to people, and that's why I think the 80s is a wonderful era too. There was so many great songs in the 80s, and maybe that's why when you listen to contemporary pop music today, you turn on the radio and you hear a lot of the influences. You hear the big kick drum, you hear the snares, the gated reverb snares, you hear the synths, you hear robot voices. I think people miss those days. People miss the happy times that the 80s were. It was a really happy time. I mean, the 90s came after. The 90s, like them or love them, love them or not, they were a bit of a downer. But the 80s, it's good memories. It's good memories musically for people.
Now, do you remember the first time you heard your band on the radio?
Kind of. I kind of remember hearing it for the first times and just being one thing I remember is seeing the name in print in the newspaper and being transfixed and just staring at it for about an hour, just like not believing that, and for me back in those days, boy, I made it. I got my name in the morning newspaper. My name's right there next to other unknown bands, so it was a good feeling. When you're starting off, that's the kind of encouragement you need. So hearing it being played on the radio, it definitely is a big bonus. It's a big thrill.
Well, you said you were in the studio doing your second album, and then they whisked you away. They wanted to put you on tour. Who did you go on tour with? What was the tour like for you guys? What happened? Did they put you with someone, or did they have you headlining, or what happened?
It was a combination. Sometimes we'd headline, and depended on the market. Sometimes we went on tour with a band called Ice House at one point, and it was opening up. We opened up for Roxy Music. We did did a small tour with Roxy Music. It was a combination of things, and then some of the markets like we New York, we usually headlined. We were popular. It was close to Montreal. We had worked that market. We were always a working band. We were always a band that was out there. And one of the things we did, Canada is such a hard place to tour. It's such a big country. It's as big as the United States, but there's a tenth of the population. So it's really hard to get from one end to the other financially. So what we had been doing, until then, was touring in the States. We were going up and down the Eastern Seaboard. Every time we'd go out, we'd go a bit further. We'd go a bit further south, go a bit further west, but we toured a lot in the States. So areas like New York, we had sort of worked that market, so we were able to headline. And then the markets where we were less known, we would be opening up for a bigger band.
Now, you were in studio and they sent you on tour. So what happened with that album? Did you guys have to put it on hold? Because then I would think if that Safety Dance had just come out after the second album was done, there probably wouldn't be so much pressure on you guys. Because I'm guessing all of a sudden you have this mega hit, and you're in the studio doing, as you said, you're having a great time. You're in the studio for your second album. We're like, oh, this is awesome. We're creating. And all of a sudden, boom. And as you said, that song, and I lived through it. That song blew everybody knew that song. What happened with you guys? When did they send you back in the studio? And were the record companies sort of being pricks, going, "We need another hit. We need another hit," with the whole Safety Dance thing in their mind?
That was it. They sent us back. It was like literally 2 years later. 2 years after we went back in the studio and sitting in front of this half finished record that we were so out of touch with that we hardly recognized ourselves in the tracks. And then having a record label on one side wanting Son of Safety Dance, Beneath Safety Dance, The Return of Safety Dance, The Escape from Safety Dance. They wanted nothing but Safety Dance over and over again. And truth be told, they dropped us. We got dropped from the label. We had to go out and find another contract, and that's when Pop Goes the World happened. Because the record label was just, they didn't hear any Safety Dances, and so they weren't prepared to continue with it. And but that's just the way the ball rolls, and that's the music industry.
How do you keep mentally attuned to that? Because it's got to be tough. And then Pop Goes the World came out, which thank God it was another hit. But when you're in there, when you're coming off a high, and it's they're not even giving you a chance because they already know what they want to hear. They want to sit there. It's like when down here where like a horror movie becomes big. Oh, let's make 87 horror movies. As an artist, is that frustrating? Is it irritating? I mean, what were you going through saying, Safety Dance, getting an iconic song is it's talent, but there's a shitload of luck involved. It's just it's timing. So what was that doing to you? Were you getting frustrated and maybe thinking that what I'm writing isn't as good, even though you probably were writing stuff that you thought was better than Safety Dance?
Oh, it was definitely frustrating. It was especially when you're a young artist and you haven't been through the machine yet, you know. Like now things are different. I mean, even on tour, like I used to think that. I mean, I've likened touring when you're a young band to being on a sports team, to being on a hockey team or a baseball team or something like that, where you travel around and you compete against other teams and in different cities. And that's kind of like what being in a band is like. You know, there's only so many places to play in every city. There's only so much room on the top 40 chart. There's only so much, you know, so many guys out there are going to interview you, and there's only so much room in the newspaper every morning. So you're competing with other bands. There's a lot of competition going on that, you know, a lot of people, a lot of music fans I don't know if they understand that, what goes on behind the scene, but there's a lot of competition. And like now we're all going out there on these 80s tours and everything like that. It's like one big happy 80s family. There's no competition. The work's been done. If people are out there touring now, it's because they want to. They're not out there to pay the rent or to try and prove a point. Everybody's out there just to have fun and be thankful that we can still do it, you know, at this point. So, yeah, but back then it was very frustrating to have a record company. You being a young artist, you don't really understand that you think it's all about you. You know, you think it's that you know the Safety Dance happened because of me, and you don't realize that it could be that the record company put $1 million into publicity and advertising, and that, you know, spent another $100,000 on a video, and, you know, paid a whole bunch of people to come and see your show, and paid a whole bunch of people to write about you in the newspaper and stuff. So you don't realize those things as a young artist. You think it's, you know, it was all, the whole success happened because of you, and you can't really understand why people are trying to tell you what to do and trying to guide your career through the future, you know. So I wish I knew then what I knew now, and that things would have caused me a lot less grief, I would expect. But like I say, that's just part of growing up and part of the business.
Did it also add to, you know, you have a hit, and as you said, the video is huge, and you had the long hair, you know, you're a good-looking guy. People recognize you now. Does that add to building the ego too? Like when you sit there, as you say, the record company is telling you this, and you're like, oh man, I just went into a bar and people bought me free food. Or, I mean, how does that play into it? Because people now don't understand videos affect. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, people, you know, I remember I went to a hairdresser one time and asked, you know, if they could make my hair look like Simon Le Bon's, and they're like, no. Like, no, your hair doesn't want to go like that. But they influenced us. How did your life change when you start getting recognized? Because it's from the video.
Well, there's a story I like to. Yeah. There's a story I like to tell. Is we were on tour after the video came out, and we were in the tour bus, and it was somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere like Jersey or somewhere like that, and we stopped the bus at a grocery store to go out and get some food. And we all get out of the bus, we go into the grocery store, and I come with my things to the cashier, and I put them all down in front of her, and she looks at me, and she points, and she starts screaming, "It's him, it's him, it's him." And the first thing that came into my mind was, she's confused me with somebody else. I think she thinks maybe I was a guy who robbed the store before, and she's pointing me out. I'm the guy. I'm the dude who robbed her last week or something. That's all I could think of. And she keeps screaming, "It's him! It's him!" She starts crying, "It's him! It's him!" And seriously, I thought that she'd confused me with a crook. And then another cashier comes over and goes, "What's up, dear? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And she goes, "It's him! It's the guy from the video." And that light went off in my head. I just left everything there, ran back into the tour bus, and my life had never been the same, you know. But that was when I realized that I couldn't really go out anymore. I couldn't really, without being recognized everywhere I went. Like I said, the power of MTV was incredible. But especially, like I said before, back in those days, there was 10 videos on their charts, and they just played them to death. And it was just like we were on every half hour. They were spinning our videos, so it was quite amazing.
Now, after Pop Goes the World, and you get a hit, when you go into the studio for the follow-up, is the record company being pains in the ass again now saying, oh, we need something that sounds like Pop Goes the World? I mean, how was it for that album? I mean, is it the same bullshit you go through even after you have a big hit, then you have another hit?
Identical. The same story happened twice. It was the same exact story that happened with Safety Dance, happened with Pop Goes the World. We made the follow-up to Pop Goes the World. The record label didn't hear another Pop Goes the World on it and dropped us. And we had to move on. That's just the way it works. There's a book out there called The Hitmen. I forget the author's name right now, but basically it's a story of my life. It's a story about the two labels that I was on. All my lawyers are in that book. Everybody is, it's exactly what went on in my career. And so it was, but like I say, it's just part of the business. I mean, the Elton John, I think was it that said, like, the rock and roll is is an exclusive club, and the price of entry is getting ripped off a couple of times before you get accepted for sure.
So you guys end up breaking up. So what do you plan to do then? I mean, you've lived. I always say you lived a life that many dream about. It's people don't get to go to a grocery store and get recognized. They don't get to be seen. You don't get to travel. You don't get to see. I'm sure you met some great people. So after you guys break up, what are your plans?
I became a stay-at-home dad. The first sort of episode led to my divorce with my first wife. I got remarried and had a kid, and decided that I was gonna stay home and raise my kid, and that's what I did for the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. I stayed home and just was a dad, and took a complete step back out of the record industry. Didn't do anything at all. And it's only since my son got old enough to go to school by himself and come home after, and then, like I said before, 80s music started becoming popular again, and I started getting offers, more and more regular offers to go out there again. And in 2010, we put the band back together again, and we've been on the road ever since. We've hit more places this time than we did the first time around. I've been to places I've never been. I was South Africa, Australia, Scandinavia, South America. These are places we never went, that got a chance to go the first time, and I've been to all the, like I say, twice as many places I've been to the second time out than the first time around.
Now, be honest now. Be honest with me here. How hard was it when you raise your son, and that's awesome, and that's very commendable. And a lot of people, it's hard. I know actors who they get, especially if a woman gets pregnant, she loses a few years on her career. It's not, like music. But in the beginning, when you pulled away, how hard was it for you to acclimate to being a dad? Like, it's not like you're sitting there going, hey, I'm Ivan from Men Without Hats. Did it take a while? And then how, like, with other parents, how did other parents react to you? Because they're like, holy shit, it's the guy from the video.
Yeah, no, it was different. First of all, I was a lot older than the people. I was in my 40s when that happened, and like all the other parents were in their 20s, so they did know who I was. They did recognize me and stuff like that. So it was a bit different, but like I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was a great experience doing that, and it was good also to take a step back. I was at a point where I really needed to step back and sort of recharge my batteries and get my priorities straight again, and when we started up again, like I said, it was great. There's been no pressure this time out. We're having a blast. I mean, this summer is going to be, I'm so looking forward to it. It's going to be so much fun. The people coming out to see us are great. They have a great time. The smile on their faces is the fuel that drives me now. I love playing Safety Dance. I love playing Pop Goes World. I love playing all our old hits. Back in the days, we're a young artist is always wants to play you like the greatest song is the next one I'm going to write type of thing, and we'd go out on tour, and I would always want to be playing stuff that people had never heard before. I want to play my new songs, like, and somebody would yell for something off the first album, I would, feel like jumping into the crowd and pummeling them, like, stop asking for this old stuff, like, get with it, like, the future's here, But now it's great. I mean, it's like, I love giving the people what they want. I love playing the old song, reaching into my catalog and delivering. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
Well, no, Abducted by 80s and Totally Tubular are completely different. Like, I talked to Jack a few weeks ago, and, Jack had done a lot of the Lost in the 80s. Wang Chung did a lot of them. And he said what he likes about Abducted by the 80s, they get to do a longer set. Wang Chung gets to do a longer set. So, on the Abducted by 80s, it's Wang Chung, it's the Motels, it's Naked Eyes, and it's you guys. Now, how long of a set do you get on a show like that?
It depends. It's anywhere from like half an hour, 45 minutes. It depends on the market usually, but there's enough time to give people enough of the band. There have been tours where we got 15 minutes but those aren't really the most satisfying things to be on. You can tell that people want more. They want to hear more, and it's sometimes it goes by so fast you don't even get a chance to enjoy it yourself. But these, like I say, these are like half an hour, 45 minutes, and there's enough time to play like a good chunk of songs that people remember and get into it and get warmed up enough to have a good time. Now,
did you book Abducted and then book Totally Tubular? Because you guys are going straight. Like it's so funny when you check your website, you have to click which is which because you go, okay, we got Abducted, and I think you guys got storm. You got canceled last week because of storm or something.
Tornado, yeah.
That's great. There's so many tornadoes in America right now. It's sick. But so, how did that come? Did the tours overlap at all, or how did it all work? Because it's
they did, but we booked the Tubular tour first, so the Abducted tour, there are a few shows that we're not doing, and those are just because of radius clauses with the Tubular tour. But we're doing as many as we can, and the tour that was canceled by the tornado last week has already been rescheduled to September. So if things go well, and it looks like they are, the ticket sales are good, and a couple of places are sold out already. So it looks like it'll keep on going. It looks like it's going into the early next year or two. And I mean, like I say, people love 80s music. They love it. It was 80s version of disco. It's like, you go to clubs now, they'll have 80s nights just the way they used to have disco nights. It's always 80s nights now. And you don't see too many 90s nights. There's I think it's a bit, like I said before, it's the music was great, but it was a bit depressing after the euphoria of the 80s, after the neon colors and the puffy hair of the 80s. The 90s came off as a bit of a downer. So I think 80s nights are going to be a thing. They're going to be a staple from now on.
What makes the 80s special to you in your heart? Now, you can say it's the songs. I always wonder, I mean, for me, it was a great time, and I've been lucky where I've interviewed I've interviewed almost all the people on the two shows you're on, and to me, I always feel humbled, because for me, it was like that coming of age, and it was just one of those things, and we still talk with friends about the 80s music, and I'll sit and have a few glasses of wine, and I'll say to Alexa, play such and such, and it just, to me, it was me coming of age. It was becoming a young adult, and it was special. To you, as someone who lived it more than me, because you were involved in what we loved, you did the songs we loved. In your heart, what makes the 80s special to you?
Well, there was so much novelty. I mean, by novelty, I mean new stuff happening. It was new technology. There was videos. There was, the clothing was new. The music was new. Everything that. The technology and the music was new. It was drum machines. There was new kinds of electronic gear happening. There was all this just new stuff to discover. The 70s, like I grew up in the 70s, but by the end it was getting kind of tired. It was just like there wasn't too much there wasn't too much innovation happening. There was, and the '80s came along. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was just like everybody was wearing colorful clothes again. It was like a new summer of love. You know, it was everybody was out there doing something. There was, and like I said before, the DIY aspect of it. Nobody was afraid to do anything either. It was just everybody was experimenting with all kinds of things, and I think that was it too. It was, you know, it was just the newness of everything. It was just the experimentation of everything. It was fun times.
Did all you guys hang out like the '80s bands? Did you guys like? I know Duran Duran hung out with Spandau Ballet, you know, and everything. But did you have a little a group that you hung out with, like groups that you really associated with and became friends with?
Well, in the '80s, we were mostly in Montreal, so Montreal's pretty isolated. I mean, I grew up in French. You know, I did all my schooling in French. I went to French university and everything. My first wife was from France, so like Montreal can be quite isolating sometimes. So we didn't really get a chance to actually hang out with people, but we saw a lot of, you know, like I say, Montreal very close to New York, so. I lived in New York for a while after that, and I did most of my hanging out after the band happened. When I moved down to New York and in the '90s, I did a lot of hanging out with people then. So it was fun times as well.
Now, looking back on your career, what are a few things that you're really proud of when you look at, and you know, when the day that you know, what are some things that make you really proud?
Well. I'm very happy about the fact that the song has crossed generations, and it seems like, especially Safety Dance has seemed to embed itself into popular embed itself into popular culture with, you know, shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy and South Park, and all these shows have picked the song up and play it and have, you know, multiple times, and so it's really in there. It's been in movies, it's been in other TV shows. It's done a lot. The fact that the video is also cross generations, and "Pop Goes the World" is a soccer chant in Europe and South America, and it's just, I guess, just the fact that our music has crossed generations. It's you know, I got into the business because one of the reasons also is because I'm a fan. I was a music fan. I was a record collector. I go to shows and that type of thing, sneaking into concerts and, you know, just being a fan. And so I especially now when I go online, go on the internet, and I go back and I sort of retrace my steps, you know, looking for the bands I used to listen to or the bands that I missed. And I see the hundreds of thousands of bands that were out there and never got a chance to be heard, never got, you know, and people, when I realize how much bands put into this thing, people put their lives into the music. They put their families, they sacrifice their everything, you know, money, family, their lives, everything, their free time. So much sacrifice goes into being in this industry. And when I think of all the bands that, like I say, never even got a chance to be heard and just by the wayside, you know, invisible, and I just, it makes me realize how lucky I am, and how blessed we are just to still be remembered and have people still listen to our music. So that's what I'm the happiest about, is that I've had the chance to people are still listening to it, and I still have a chance to get out there and do it.
Did you get to meet any of your idols, like your musical idols, when you in your career? Have you got a chance, and is it as great as you thought it would be?
Oh yeah, I've met a lot of them. And I have to say that I've never been let down once. I've never met anybody that I really respected and really like listened to when I grew up. And you know, sometimes you hear a lot of stories. Oh, I met that guy. I used to love him. He was a prick. I hate him. You know. But now it's. I mean, I like I say, Roxy Music. I grew up listening to Roxy Music. I was so stoked when we toured with them. And Brian Ferry was the ultimate gentleman, and all his band. The band was just super. Even when I put the band back together in 2010, our first tour was going across America with the Human League and the B-52s, which were two bands that back then influenced me to do it myself. You know, I was listening to both those bands before I even started Men Without Hats. And when I met those guys, too, the same thing. They were just so great. And everybody, Devo, the awesome, just awesome people. All the bands we tour with now, everybody, like, from, the Wang Chung guys are great. Howard Jones, I've done a lot of tours with him. Flock of Seagull, all these bands, they're and everybody's great. And everybody's having a great time. It's like I say, it's maybe rare, but I have not been let down once.
Well, before we go, give me a good '80s music story. I always like to hear a good story. I know you probably have tons of them, but give me one that it sticks out in your head that I can go, man, that's a great story.
Well, one of the stories I like to tell is that how we received our first gold record. We were playing at the Palladium in New York City, and back in the days, there was this guy his name was Mark Gastineau. He played for the New York Jets.
Yeah, he would do the sack dance. Yeah.
And he would do the sack dance, and they'd play safety dance. Whenever he did a sack, they'd play safety dance. And Pete Rozelle, the commissioner at the time, banned him from doing it because it took up too much time on TV and it made the game run over and spill into the other TV shows. So he banned it. And Mark Gastineau said, no, man, I can dance if I want to. And he would keep doing it. And they kept playing the safety dance every time he did a sack. And we thought that was great. And so when we got our first gold record for the Rhythm of Youth album, he came on stage at the Palladium and presented it to us on stage and gave us the gold record and also one of his jerseys, which I still have, and number 99. And so that was just one of the great memories that I have amongst all the great memories that I have. But that's one of my fondest memories of being in this band.
That was great, man. I thank you for taking the time to come on today. People, go to safetydance.com. You can find all the tour information. I'm going to try to see you guys in Atlantic City when in the summer year. That's the closest to New Jersey. For some reason, no one plays in Philly anymore. But go listen to their music. Honestly, people, go listen to Again Part 1 and Again Part 2. And it's just, you'll enjoy it. And the last song, you'll go, oh, wow, No Friends of Mine. It's an alternative to Safety Dance, but it's great. And go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find 1,007 episodes there. You can email me at coopertalk.net. Twitter, it's at Cooper Talk. January 13th and January 26th, I'll be hosting Speakeasy stand-up at the newest, hottest complex in the South Jersey area. That's Soundplex Studios. Email me to get more information and ticket prices and all that. So people, go support live music. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.